Welcome to the Love Yourself Healthy podcast. I am Melanie Lillis. I'm an eating psychology coach, nutritional therapist, and I have my Bachelor of Physical and Health Education. Throughout this podcast, we are going to be diving into the realm of eating psychology, body image, self-love, and creating a healthy and happy mind. I cannot wait to share my knowledge with you in hope that it's going to positively influence your life. Welcome back to the podcast, you beautiful people. I am so super excited to share this podcast with you. I am such a fan of the girl that I interviewed today. And if you don't know her, her name is Sarah Holloway. She is a lawyer turned funtrepreneur. She founded Matcha Maiden and Matcha Milk Bar. She also has the podcast Seize the Yay, which if you follow me on Instagram, you would know that I share it quite often. And she also has her personal brand, which is Spoonful of Sarah on Instagram. I am so grateful that she scheduled some time out of her busy life to come on my podcast. And I know that you're going to absolutely love all of her nuggets of wisdom and just her life story pretty much. She's super inspirational and motivational. You will also get an epic cameo appearance from Ang Foot. And if you do not know who Ang Foot is, I suggest you go to Instagram and search ANG_foot, and I'm sure you will not be disappointed by the epic amounts of chin photos. She is inspirational within herself, Ange, and I was so excited to meet her as well. So before we go to the podcast, I need to share my listener review for the week, and it is from a girl named Alyssa. And Alyssa said, "Hi Mel, I'm a new podcaster who came across yours when I researched health. I just want to thank you so much for your positive vibes you brought to my day during my summer job. This made me realize health isn't just how healthy I eat and how much I work out. I'm constantly having body issues and judging myself, and it's nice that I'm not alone, and it's nice to know ways to cope with it. Thank you so much for being who you are and promoting self-love. Love you and your positive vibes. You've truly made such a difference in my outlook on life to put me first, even on my down days. Come to America sometime. I'd definitely come see you." Thank you so much, Alyssa. That really does mean so much. So without further ado, let's go to the podcast. Oh, P.S. I am still trying to figure out the whole audio thing. I am not amazing at technology, so some of the audio sounds a little distorted at the beginning in particular, but don't worry, eventually I'll become really good at making sure my audio is great, but in the meantime you're gonna have to deal with it. Hello Sarah.
Hi.
How are you?
Way more high pitched than I actually am.
Thank you so much for coming on my podcast.
Thank you so much for flying to Melbourne to record it. This is so exciting.
I know. I was just telling Sarah, this is like my first proper one-on-one interview, and I'm nervous and I'm kind of fangirling right now, but I'm just like keeping it in.
Not at all. Oh my gosh, I just think you're going to be totally converted to interviewing face to face. We're just like literally chilling in the living room.
Yeah, we've just walked into a random person's house, so we don't even know who it is.
Total stranger. No, it's a friend of mine's house. We're not that weird. But
so that's what we're just going to tell everybody.
I don't want anyone to think, like, report us to the police.
Yeah, exactly. No, it is. She does know this person. It's fine. But thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I did have somewhere organised, fell through, whatever. Sarah was amazing and organised this house, which is great. So to break the ice, not so much for you, for me, because I'm nervous, more for me, we're going to do a quick this or that. So you just have to choose one or two.
I love those. Yeah, they're my favourite.
All right.
I'm really indecisive though, just letting you know. I'll probably be like, can I phone a friend? Lifeline.
No phoning a friend unless Ang walks in.
Yeah. Ang Foot is going to be making a cameo at some stage.
I can't wait for it. It's going to make my day. Okay. Are you ready?
I am.
Sweet or savoury?
Savoury.
Cardio or weights?
Weights.
Dogs or cats?
Dogs. Oh my gosh.
Sarah has a really great dog, Paul.
Yeah.
Amazing. I feel like I'm going to know this one, but you never know. Tea or coffee?
Oh, tea. For sure.
Okay. Call or text?
Text. Oh my gosh, who calls?
You know when someone calls, even if it's a good friend, I'm like,
No, I'm like, I need to know the topic
Yeah.
and mentally prepare for it. So you can text me first
Yeah.
and then I will know what the call is about and then I'll answer.
Exactly. Actually, you know what me and my friends have started doing is like voice recording. So it's like kind of like a
We
phone
do
call,
that
but you don't have to
too.
commit to the phone call.
Yes. And then it doesn't matter, you know, whether you can catch each other at the same time because no one's free at the same time. We all have 5 minutes, but they're all at different 5-minute times.
Exactly.
But you want to hear their voice because then you feel
I
closer
know.
to them. We do it too. Do you use Voxer?
Oh, no, I just use like on Instagram. This is the voice recorder.
Oh.
Yeah, simple. I'm not as like technical as you are.
Oh, I only do Voxer because they don't disappear. Like you can always re-listen to them. So if you get halfway through and you're driving and then you get back home and you've forgotten the first 2 minutes, you go back to the start and you can like, listen to it.
Maybe
again.
that's like WhatsApp because I have used WhatsApp.
Yes, it's
before.
like that. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Some things I don't want to replay though.
True.
Yeah.
That's true. Those are more videos for me then.
All right. Facebook or Instagram?
Oh, Instagram.
Okay. And last one. This is hard. Would you rather never hear music again or lose the ability to read?
Oh,
That's
wow.
tricky.
Wow, that is a great question.
Yep. I know. It's hard.
Oh my gosh. I don't think I've ever had, I love playing Would You Rather. I play it all the time and especially on long, plane rides or car trips. Nick hates it, won't have a bar of me, but Ange and I will go for hours.
On the stupidest ones too, but you're just like, I just don't know.
I love reading. I really do. But I think there are other activities like reading that can get you into a really relaxed, beautiful state.
Yep.
Whereas there aren't many equivalents to hearing music
This is true.
that put you in the same mood as music. So I
This is
think
true.
I would choose to keep the ability to hear music and not keep the ability to read. Is that what the question was?
Yeah, it was. I'd probably go the same because these days things that are read are normally made into movies now anyway.
Yes.
So it's okay. We'll watch it instead of reading
Yeah, and I love the process of reading. It's very calming and you get into a zone, but I feel like you can get into that from music.
it. Yeah.
Or
And so
from
many
other
things.
activities.
Yeah, totally. All right, so before we get into all the amazing things that you obviously are doing now, I wanted to just look back a little bit into your past, go into your childhood and dive into all things that was Sarah.
Yeah.
So I want to know a few things. I know that you were adopted from Korea,
Yep.
that you have always been equal parts nerdburger as well as arty farty. You were a part of the Australian Ballet, which I really want to talk about later.
Yeah.
You played many musical instruments, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were in a band.
I was in a band. I love it when people do their research as much as I do.
Yeah, I know. So what I guess I want to know is, how was your childhood? Were there any like pivotal moments or any negative things or struggles that kind of you went through?
So I had an amazing childhood. I loved growing up. I was adopted from Korea, but I was 6 months old. So I have no, people are always like, how was it? Like, how was it compared to Australia? I'm like, do you remember when you were 6 months old?
Exactly.
Like, I don't remember anything. So in my memory, I grew up here. It was as if I was born here, as if I was born into the family that ended up adopting me. They're the most incredible family. I have always understood what being adopted meant because I look Asian and my parents are white. So at some stage they couldn't kind of keep it a secret, At some stage I was going to wonder and ask, like, why do I look so different to you? So we always knew about it, which meant that there was no big, trauma or shock or secrecy around that part of our story. And because we had no memories either, I think, if you're a bit older, it can be a jarring kind of interesting part of your personality. But for us, it was always like, okay, cool. Like, that's where we were born and it's unique and it's interesting.
Yeah.
But we've only ever known one family. So they're our family.
Yeah, that's your mum and dad.
Yeah. And mum and dad had both come from the country. So all our, extended family were either from Gippsland or from Murrindindi, Alexandra, which is like near Eildon, so country Victoria. So had a really good balance between growing up in the city, but spending a lot of time in the country and just had a really free, amazing, supported, loving childhood with, people always say it takes a village to raise you. And I had a million aunties and family friends. And, I just feel like we had a very safe, happy childhood where our parents really encouraged us. I have a younger brother who's 4 years younger, also adopted, same orphanage, different biological family, but same birthday, which is so...
I have heard this and I'm just like, how amazing.
I know.
Like, what are the chances of that?
It's crazy. I really believe, and I always have, that everything happens for a reason and you end up with the people that you need. And I think that's one of those very, very early examples for us that we were meant to be together. We've always been encouraged to kind of explore all different sides of our personality and our interests. And our parents were, I think because we look Asian, a lot of people think we had tiger parents and went through that whole thing. But I'm like, we're white. We're country bumpkins. Like, our parents were like, play sport, do whatever. Go get dirty and ride a tractor. Like, do whatever you want. I think we were really encouraged to play all kinds of sports, do lots of music, be really academic, just go in whatever direction that we could. And our parents were really supportive in all of that. I would say the tougher parts were just being in, a small, local, largely white demographic primary school that was, a Catholic primary school. And then I went to a government school in high school. It was more so in primary school, we looked so different. Yeah. And not only did we look different, we had a background story that people didn't really understand what adoption was, because why would you explain it to a child if they didn't need to know? Yeah. So we did get a lot of questioning, like a lot of, why are you different? Or why do you look different to your parents? Or why are your eyes small? Or, what about your real mum? And, kids get nasty about whatever they can choose to be nasty about. So for us, it was always like, they're not your real mum or they're not your real dad. And I think, every kid takes that kind of thing differently. For some reason, I think it just bounced off me. Like, I don't know whether it was because my parents had equipped me so well to deal with it, or because I was just like a real weirdo who used to just rock up and wearing like 7 different tutus on top of each other. Like, I've always been a bit of an oddball. So I think I just didn't really, I don't know, I was just off in my own little world, and I had ballet and I had lots of things going on. So I was like, you can say that, but it just, I don't know, I don't think it really fazed me, and I never look back and think, I had a really tough childhood, I was bullied. I just think that's part of building resilience, and whereas my brother took it a lot harder, and I think it's harder for boys as well, I think for girls it gets harder in high school, but in primary school you kind of got your own shit going on, whereas boys, if you're different and if you're not, if your parents weren't the footy player or the blah, 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 I just think he took it a lot harder than I did. But other than that, I started ballet when I was 4, I think, maybe 3 or 4. So that kind of set me up very early on, learning how to manage myself and my time and fitting that in, and being disciplined and learning about fitness and exercise. And I kept doing it until I was, I think, maybe 16 or 17, and had done it like full time. Like I went really, really hard at it. And that was a career that I'm very glad I didn't pursue now, but I think set my whole childhood up as teaching me how to be driven, how to motivate myself, how to improve and set goals and targets, and, just be independent. I think having a kind of sport or a pursuit when you're younger really helps you when you're older, because people scream at you and like, people, it's a hard world. It's a hard world. And especially when you get to a point where you're, wanting to make it professional, and in the ballet world, the culture, I don't know how it is now, but it's not great. Like, I can imagine. They scream at you, you're meant to look and be a certain size and all that stuff. And again, I don't know, it just never, I hated it. I hated parts of it when people would like just yell at you and like smack you across the legs and stuff. But I was so driven that I was like, it's going to make me a better person.
That's what I need.
I don't look at any of it and go, oh, that was tough. Yeah. So, and then I was very, very disciplined with that for a while. And then around year 9 and 10, when I had the choice to go full-time or to finish school, that's when I decided, I kind of have other interests. I have shown some kind of academic promise in school, and Mum was very much like, you can always go back and be a ballerina, but you have to finish school. So if you want it that badly, you can go back after. And by the time I finished school, I realized that there are boys and parties and like other stuff out there. Good things. Like other things you can be doing on your weekends. So then the next couple of years I went a little bit crazy, and I like got onto the party scene and was like a total rat bag for a good part of high school. And then just randomly went back to nerdy and put it all together for year 12 and got into law. And then it's been
so this is before year 12 that you went off the rails?
Yeah, totally off the rails.
Okay, cool.
I've been through lots of different phases. It's funny when I look back. But I think generally the whole thing I look back at, I'm like, every single phase and every single pathway and journey all contributed to where I've ended up.
Oh, yeah, it always does. Even the really hard times that you think surely there's nothing good that can come of it, you look back and you're like, oh, that led me to this, which led me to that, which led me to this. If I didn't do that, I wouldn't be here. So wow, it's amazing.
Totally.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I was like a really, really happy kid. Obviously we all have stuff.
Totally.
But yeah, I like have always had a really active, excited mind. I've always loved trying new things. I like love my comforts, but I also then thrive on challenge. I love to go too fast. You know, all the things that you see in my personality now, you can kind of look back at my whole life and go, yes, I could have predicted that. Like, totally. You've always shown those kind of traits, whether you've, channeled it into dancing or then corporate career or business, no matter what, it's kind of all those same things.
Totally.
Yeah, the good and the bad.
Yeah, for sure. So with the adoption and with the ballet and stuff, they're massive things obviously you went through. Well, you say you weren't like affected too much by the adoption or anything like that, but then you said, throughout primary school there were comments that were said about your physical appearance and all of that, and then going into the Australian Ballet, I was an elite athlete as well, cool. Which was awesome, but a lot of people, well, anyone who listens to my podcast would know that stemmed into an eating disorder, because there was a lot of pressure on body and how you looked, and as you said, with the ballet there's so much pressure and people are yelling at you. And did any of that affect you in a bad way, body image wise or confidence wise or self-talk, mindset, or anything like that?
I definitely had times, when I was a ballerina, I was super, super conscious of like which muscles I built up. I didn't ride bikes for most of my childhood because they built up your quads too much and, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I definitely went through phases where my physical appearance was very important, and where I was not obsessed with it, but definitely really, really conscious of it. But I think a couple of things contributed to me avoiding, and I'm very, very grateful for this, avoiding the whole eating disorder thing through a ballet career. And I think one of them is that I have a very typical Asian body. So it's a very 12-year-old boy. I didn't ever hit that phase of puberty where you're like, oh my God, I'm getting hips too many hips and too many boobs. I was the opposite. I was like, when are my boobs going to come through?
I'm with you.
I'm 30 and I'm like, I'm still waiting for you, boobies. Like, I never kind of hit a big feminine body change that then would encourage me to freak out about it and then need to control that. I stayed very beanpole, so I didn't feel that anything was ever getting out of my control and that I needed to rein it in. And because of that, I fitted a lot more than other girls at that puberty phase of their childhood or their teenagehood. I still was in the kind of body shape that the ballerinas were meant to be in. So I didn't get it as hard as other people, and I didn't need to do as much to change my eating or my metabolism to stay like that. So because it never was a challenge so much, like even if I, had started eating way more, I still would have probably stayed that similar shape. I didn't spiral as much as you definitely could, and I'm very surprised that I didn't. And then, I think I probably left the really intense professional stage right at the right time, just at that time where, I did get out just before I might have become a lot more serious about it. And if it had become, my full-time thing, I might have gone a lot more down that track. But then I ended up focusing on boys and parties, and I had not really kind of let my hair down a lot during that time. So then I went the other way and didn't care about all that stuff. And again, still didn't put on any weight, and my boobs still didn't come through. So I still was a 12-year-old boy.
Still waiting again.
I still was like, and it's only like kind of years and years later, then I went into law, and then I was focused so academically that again, I didn't really feel any external pressures to look a certain way, because then my life became so different. It became very, very, you were valued by your brain and by your achievements, and that, I think there's been a really lucky combination of factors that meant I've touched on a lot of things that other women have touched on and ended up in much more challenging positions, but have genetics that have had family around me, or I don't know. I mean, it's just such a resounding issue in society. And of course, like any women, I definitely have qualms about like certain things about my body that I would like to be different. And if I'm going on a holiday or going to be in bathers, I get like a bit funny and I'm like, carbs, like, there's of course that. But I did go through a really big phase. It wasn't so much an eating disorder, but it was, we went to Africa and I got a parasite. We were working in helping build schools, and I lost 15 kilos, got down to like 45. So what happened then was I didn't have an eating disorder, but once I had lost that weight, I definitely could resonate with, once people see themselves smaller, then
Wanting to
you
stay
think
that way.
you think that if you put, obviously I'd had 15 kilos to put back on, but I put say back 10, and and I was like, I don't fit my old clothes, so I must be fat. Like I did experience that whole thing of thinking you look a way that now looking back on the photos, you're like, how did I have
like
no reality about what I thought I looked like then?
Yeah.
And little markers, like if you bought clothes when you were skinny and then you put the weight back on, you think you're fat even though you were too skinny in the first place, you know?
Yeah.
So that whole recovery the next year of putting that weight back on, and I ended up with adrenal fatigue and learning how to, you know, it was really hard. Like putting on weight when you've got a fast metabolism is actually quite difficult.
To eat so much.
And the right kind of food, because you can put on weight really quickly by eating lots of junk, but then the minute you stop eating that way, it'll just drop off you again. So I was like stuffing my face, and that then kind of my hunger hormones and everything got out of whack. So it took me like a good 2 to 3 years after that to get back to a stage of just like knowing when I'm hungry, knowing when I'm not. And I would say that was a very similar experience to anyone who's dropped the weight on purpose in the first place through some kind of eating disorder. So the recovery would have been very similar.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's something that in some form or another, every woman is going to go through a phase where they're unhappy with their body, where they see it in a completely unobjective way, and where they start to do things to, you know, the flip side is you exercise too much. You might not have a full-blown eating disorder, but when I was, you know, around 10 kilos lighter, maybe not the 15, but when I did get back to exercise, I was like, I need to stay toned like this. Like I can see my abs. Like I need to.
It feels good, right?
Yeah.
Like that whole physical appearance thing, and you get stuck on, I need to look like this forever.
Totally. And I don't know. I think it's just a phase that everyone goes through where they might push the limits a little bit and go too far one way. And it's almost a rite of passage. Like you learn that, and then you realize how far you've pushed it, and you come back to somewhere in the middle. But now I feel very, very comfortable with my body. I am so comfortable with what I eat. I feel like I know the right balance between exercise and eating to feel energetic and glow rather than looking a certain size or whatever. But I'm 30. Like that took a decade. It did take me like 10 years to not be like niggly about everything. So
Totally.
Yeah.
It's crazy the amount of women who do have that issue. When I started this podcast, it was predominantly going to be all about just body image, helping people who are struggling with any kind of eating challenges, disordered eating and stuff like that. And when I started it, my boyfriend was like, are there really that many people who need help? Like, because he's a guy, he doesn't, you know, he's very oblivious. And I'm like, I don't think you understand. Nearly every girl, probably 99% of girls have one part of their body that they want to change and that they're happy with. And I started this podcast, and my podcast isn't big. I probably get maybe 2,000 listens on an episode. That's not big
2,000 people. Like
totally,
you know.
But from the first podcast, which maybe had, you know, a couple of hundred, it's now one of the biggest ones. I had so many messages from people around the world. First of all, I'm like, how did you find my podcast?
Yeah.
Great back-end work from me. But also, wow. So many people every day are just like, oh, wow, your podcasts are really helping me. I'm struggling with this issue or this issue. And showing these to my boyfriend, he's like, oh, my God. Like, it's just insane. Like, the different severity and levels, obviously, that we go through. So, so I want to touch on your adrenal fatigue and that a little bit later. But first of all, do you have videos of your ballet?
I don't. It was so long ago.
You know, I
have
searched.
I was like, that's amazing.
I was like, I really want to see.
I've got some VHS videos, but I don't have anything to play them in anymore. So I should.
Well, you could get it transferred.
Yeah, I was gonna say I should send them off and get them
and then
done.
you need to upload that.
For
everyone to see. Anyway, that was just a side note.
Yeah. Oh my God, so funny.
I literally was searching. I'm like, I really want to see you do ballet because you look like you could be a ballerina. Because you're so like poised and together.
I still have posture.
Posture. Like I'm sitting here like this.
It's
posture
funny.
for sure. And
years later, it's so funny how. Yeah. The other thing, you know, I know this like sounds silly, but two things have also saved me from eating disorders. One of them is I have like an actual phobia of vomit. So I could never be bulimic. Like there's just
great.
no...
Although not great when you have an like stomach issues.
Yeah, like when I have food poisoning, if I know that I could just throw up and it'd be over, I'd rather be nauseous for like 5 days. I'm so weird about it. And the other thing is I'm one of those people that when I don't eat enough, I cannot function. Like I just get flaky. I start to like run into things. Like I'm not, Nick can go for days and he'll still be, he won't even notice that he hasn't eaten. And so he said to me one day, he's like, well, I know that and now that I know you so well, I never have to worry about you.
Yeah.
Like there's other girls I would have worried about, but I know you can't do it that way and you can't do it the other way. And
so there's no
chance. Like, you know, and I actually think that I'm lucky that those two things have always kind of kept me in line, because I've never even contemplated going further. But I think almost every girl has gone through some kind of weird, fucked up. Oh, sorry.
No, you can swear. That's
I'm never sure. But yeah, like weird, fucked up relationship with themselves where they hate part of them, or we all, you know, I think there was some test done, I can't remember which company did it, but women were asked to choose the photo of themselves that they thought they looked like, or something like that, and they all choose the ugly one. Like we all see ourselves as so different to how everyone else sees us, and it's terrible, but it's widespread, and I don't think we should beat ourselves up about it. I think it's a very female thing to do. Yeah. It's part of how we think, and it's
a cultural thing. And
it's cultural.
It's not brought in by inside of us. It's like society expectations and what we see in the media and what's pointed in our faces from the day we're born. It's not
and mannequins and the shape of everything. Like, you know, even though I definitely feel very grateful that I have a metabolism that keeps me quite slender, I always see mannequins and stuff that have boobs and curves, and like, so of course I'm going to have a complex the opposite way to most people, but everyone has it. Like, there are very, very few people out there who will have all their life been like, I'm happy with my body. I think I feel great. I feel sexy. I'm confident.
That's the one thing. I don't have boobs either. And it's like throughout my whole training, if I had boobs, because I used to do sport aerobics. This is so funny.
That's so cool.
It's hilarious. But it's kind of like gymnastics style. It's not old school aerobics at all, but it's like a similar vibe. It's really hilarious. Leotards and faces and stuff.
Yeah.
But you know, you do skills where you'll jump in the air and you'll land in a push-up position on the ground. That's actually how I fractured my jaw.
Oh my God.
But if
boobs
I had
would
boobs,
be inconvenient.
I mean, they're not. That hurt.
Yeah.
So the whole time I'm like, oh, thank God. And we had to do lots of sprinting and stuff. I was like, if I had boobs, this would be painful. So I was always like, nah, I'm fine. Don't even care. But I think something beautiful happens. I'm nearly 30 as well. When you shift to like 30, I feel like towards the end of your 20s, your whole mindset kind of changes, and it's just like, I'm okay with this.
Yeah.
I'm okay with this. Like I speak to a lot of girls who are like 16, 15, and I'm like, I always just try to say to her, I'm like, it gets better. I'm like, your mindset shifts, and you're going through a really hard time, and it's probably going to get really hard throughout your 20s and stuff. But I just, like, there's so many people I speak to who are my age or getting into their, you know, mid 30s, and there's such a different kind of approach to life. It's more so like, I don't even care about that stuff anymore. I care about my health, and I care about what I'm going to achieve
and how I feel,
and how I feel exactly, which is a really beautiful movement. And there's, you know, a really nice kind of shift happening now on Instagram where people you share lots of bloopers, which I love.
I think that helps me. Like, I think one of the things that has really helped is in the lead up to turning 30, everyone asked, you know, are you having breakdown? And I kind of did in around 29. I was kind of like, oh my God, holy shit. You get to this stage where you're like, what? Oh my God.
Yeah.
But then by the time that birthday actually came around, I was so freaking excited, because I realized when people say your 30s are your best decade, it's literally because you're still young enough to enjoy yourself, but you enjoy yourself with the knowledge that all the shit from your 20s was just in your head. You finally accepted who you are. You finally accepted what's important, what isn't, and then you can go out and enjoy it without feeling guilty, whereas you spend your whole 20s in your head. So I kind of turned 30 and I was like, this is fucking awesome. Like, I'm going to be home at 5 p.m.
That's it. But I think as well, when you get to 30, it's like, in my head, I'm like, okay, in my 30s, I've got 10 more years until I'm 40, which then now feels old, because 30 doesn't feel old anymore. I'm 30. But I'm like, live it. Like, are you serious? Like, I had a severe eating disorder for 4 years. Oh, God, and 4 years, I hated my body. Didn't want to wear certain things. Was so, like very heavily bulimic. And I just think so much of that was wasted. You know? Like, why waste so much? Thank you. And that's why I did this podcast. I started this podcast to help others and you know, to give everyone the tips that I learned. I went and studied eating psychology and just know so much that helped me, and that's why I want to help other people. So that's a little bit for people to look forward to when they get a bit older. Like, don't look towards your 30s as a bad thing, you know.
It's the most liberating thing. Turning 30 is the most freeing thing that's happened, and I'm just so, I can't explain to my 20-year-old self how amazing it feels to just be cool with who you are. Like, there's obviously still times where you're like, I would like to be a little bit more this or a little bit more that, but you kind of just don't hate yourself if you're not. You're like, that's whatever. Like, life is short. You're just enjoying yourself. Part of, you know, my bloops and everything was just because I started to realize I was making myself feel crap by only posting stuff that was like aesthetic, which meant that I had to only, like every time I got a photo, I had to live up to that standard.
Yeah.
But I realized I created that. So if I start posting the funny, crappy stuff, then that's all I have to ever live up to.
Yeah,
and it just like, it was like a process of freeing myself. So if I'm so worried about that angle, if I just let a photo of at that angle come out, I'm never going to worry about that angle anymore because it's out in the open.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that process started. I decided to post to every single time I took a photo or a series of photos, find the one I was least comfortable with and hated the most, and then just put it out there before I had a chance to think about it. Yeah. And it was like the best thing I've ever done. So liberating. And also the amount of people who, like, it makes their day to see my chins out there, and then they do the same. Like, they feel better to post a photo they don't like about themselves, and then realize that it's actually just a photo. It's just their face at a different angle. Like, everyone looks ugly from the selfie camera, like when it's too low down in front of you, you know?
You accidentally open the camera and you're like, ugh.
And I think the other thing about eating disorders as well is, like, some of them are very, like, intimately related to an outcome of how your body looks, but a lot of them are not even related to your body. So many of them are young women who are reacting to circumstances they can't control. There's been trauma, and it's a control thing. Anorexia, a lot of the time, is people just trying to control their life because they can't control any other factors. So they think, I can, like, control my food, so I'm in control.
Exactly. Yeah, our body always wants to be in a sense of balance, and when it can feel that something's really out of whack, whether that is, as you said, trauma or something they're going through in life, but it's usually, as you said, nothing to do with their body. And I've shared about this on the podcast before, and mine had nothing to do with my body. I was in an abusive relationship at 15, and then that went on to having, like, a really intense kind of, as an elite athlete, having really intense times for that. And that's kind of what shifted, having so much pressure on me, but also the main kind of core of it was the abuse. And that's literally, I was listening to a podcast.
Like you lash out in response to something that happens to you.
I was listening to a podcast with the Plant Proof, with Simon, is it Simon Hill?
Yeah,
so Simon and Dr. B. And he was saying that nearly everyone with anorexia, not nearly everyone, sorry, there's a high percentage of people who have anorexia that have gone through trauma or some kind of abuse or something like that. So, yeah, it's pretty crazy. But it's so beautiful. I think you do it really well. Laura and Steph do it really well, as sharing their bloopers. And obviously, you know, like, Steph's a massive model. And she's got such a big following. And it's so nice to see her do that. And then Laura, I've never met. Oh, no, actually, I have met them both, but haven't had a conversation with them. I've met them. Laura is just such a beautiful soul as
lovely.
well. I just love.
They're both exactly the same in real life as well.
Yeah,
like, they actually are like that, which is so lovely.
I know, you're like buds, right? I'm really jealous.
They're so lovely. They're amazing. Yeah. I love what they're doing. I think it's so important that if you do have a little bit of influence, that comes with a responsibility to use it in. Either don't use it at all, or use it in a way that can further other people's positivity and positive experiences, because it's hard. I mean, you can't, it kind of makes sense, and I don't agree with it, but it kind of makes sense why media outlets do that. Of course, like, big magazines are going to put, I mean, I think there's an amazing change, but of course they're going to put, like, inspirational or aspirational body shapes and all that stuff.
Trying to sell something.
They're creating this ideal life, but because we're not going to be able to necessarily change them overnight, it's so important that the people who do just happen to have now, in a world where smaller people can have an influence, that you create a really nice ripple effect where you can. And even small things, like, I haven't had an eating disorder, which I'm very, very grateful for, but I have had terrible anxiety. Like, it's never one thing, but it could be another. There's always something that everyone's going through behind the scenes.
There's always battles.
Yeah, and mine was crippling for a really long time. Like, I had times where I literally couldn't get out of bed for, like, months at a time, and during the time that we've had the business, because you just completely burn yourself out, and, like, there's a brain chemistry imbalance, and you can't feel serotonin, you can't feel joy, and that's, again, like, I think eating disorders are similar. It's a mental imbalance where your perspective is completely warped of what's happening in your life, and everyone goes through something. But if you can put out little bits here and there that help other people on their journey, it helps you, but it also can help someone else.
Like, totally. I don't get as much I get a lot of reward out of what I do, but when it's helping other people, like, there's just nothing better. I'm also a school teacher, and I get a lot of enjoyment out of teaching the kids at school, but when I'm teaching about my passion and genuinely changing someone's life in a mental health kind of aspect, And like I do, I'm like, oh my God. Anytime I get a message, I get a little tear. I'm like, oh.
It's so exciting, isn't it? It's like you can't do anything better for the universe or yourself to put out good vibes. And I think, I just think that if you, even a small platform, like you think that 2,000 people isn't a lot, but that's a huge amount of listens. That's a huge amount of touch points of people who you might have said one sentence that changed their journey. Like, I just think everything has a butterfly effect. And you can choose which direction that you help turn people in. I always think my favorite quote ever is, people will never remember what you did or what you said. They will always remember how you made them feel. And so your personal brand and your legacy and everything you do is the feeling that you leave people with. And I always want it to be excitement and possibility. And even in the reality is, sees your yay and everything is amazing, but you're not always feeling yay. So even in the moments where you aren't, just leaving people with the possibility that it gets better. It's all for a reason.
And we all feel like this.
It happens to everyone. And that's part of joy and growth and excitement, is that you go through the lower bits so you can come back up to the high bits. If we were happy all the time, it would just be boring.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't be happy because there's no difference.
Exactly. It'd be our baseline and we wouldn't learn. You wouldn't learn anything. If you're in a comfortable position, you're not growing or challenging or
totally. So speaking of changing direction, let's talk a little bit about what you're doing now, because you were a lawyer, which is a very serious suit job, and then you turned, I guess, your passion project. So you now you have obviously the CZA podcast, which I share all the time. It's amazing.
You're such a sweetheart.
Absolutely amazing. So the CZA podcast, you've got your own personal brand, which is Spoonful of Sarah on Instagram. You've got Matcha Maiden, Matcha Milk Bar. Anything else?
Not yet. No, that's keeping me busy enough for now.
So how did you, I guess, go from being a lawyer to doing this, or what was your kind of deciding factors of wanting to follow and pursue this?
So it was really, I feel like it's so cliche because I've said it so many times, but it was a total happy accident. And this is why I'm so passionate. This is why CZA has ended up coming out, is because I really, really want to remind people that not only do you have more control over your life than you think, in that you can make a decision now to change your life and no one's going to tell you no, it's not as scary and big as you think. And I think we all spend a lot of time being really reactive to our circumstances rather than being proactive and just saying, I want my life to look like this, so I'm going to do this to make that happen. What is more scary to me is not that we don't make positive changes, but that we don't even know we want to make positive changes. So in my law career, I wasn't even unhappy. I didn't even know any better. I just had no idea what else was out there, because I just studied law to get into law, and I thought that was, that was what was familiar to me. My dad was a lawyer. I just thought that was going to be, a degree that either I'd love being a lawyer or I wouldn't, and I'd end up going a little bit sideways into something else. I opened lots of doors, but nowhere near as far as I thought I'd go. And I was just chugging along. It was I think being adopted has always left me with this feeling of intense gratitude for being here, because I know how, one tiny change at 6 months old, and I could have ended up growing up in an orphanage. I'm very aware of those sliding doors kind of things. So I've always been appreciate what you have. And at the time it was very hard to get a job. So the fact that I had a job at all, I was like, wow. And it's at a good firm, and I got to travel. I was learning all the time. I was learning from, some of the greatest legal minds that were in the best firms. And so I really just chugged along for, I think it was about 3 years, quite enjoying it. There were really long hours. It was really hard, but I wasn't unhappy. I was just like, this is my job. This is what I do. I'm not passionate every day, but I'm like, it's fine.
Yeah, it's doable.
It's doable. I can do this. And I think that's what's scary, is that what I thought was just this is it for me. Yeah. It's doable. I'm good. Was 10% of what I've ended up finding out about myself. Yeah, wow. And it was only by accident that I kind of discovered all this. So I'm really everyone, explore yourself. Explore everything, because find what lights you up. You might be only 5% of the way there and you're just settling. Yeah. So I got to around the third year, and that's when we went to Africa. And that's when this whole big parasite, sickness, A-type personality thing. I went straight back to work, didn't take any time off, didn't even really think I was that sick. I was like, whatever, I'll think my way through it. You just aren't aware. At the very beginning of my health journey, I had no connection between my decisions and what my body was telling me. And that led to complete burnout because I just wasn't reacting to what was happening. And in that process, I had to take a lot of time off work and was also banned from coffee. And I was like, dude, I work 20-hour days. I'm an M&A lawyer. Like, I need coffee. It's that or drugs, and I can't do drugs because I'm a lawyer. So I need coffee. And I was lucky enough to get sent to the firm's headquarters in Hong Kong for a deal that I was working on. And over there, matches everywhere. It's been around for centuries. You know, in Asia, it's not a new thing. It's not a buzzword. No, it's just the tea powder they've had for like ever, since the Zen Buddhist monks used it in meditation. And it's got a really good amount of caffeine in it. So I think it's about half the amount of coffee, but it's got a unique amino acid in it called L-theanine, which makes it slow release into your bloodstream. So if you're, you know, sick or a little bit caffeine sensitive, or if, you know, you might have your coffee in the morning, but you can't have it in the afternoon, matcha is so much more gentle on your body. And you don't get that kind of spike of energy, but then crash afterwards. So I was able to tolerate it. But I also did get a good buzz of energy. So I was like, wow, there's this green powder that's like a healthy coffee alternative in a world where the health food market's booming. Everyone's being more adventurous with powders. You know, the fact that anyone drinks spirulina is, given how it smells and tastes, like people are more open-minded than they have ever been.
Spirulina is so gross.
Right? But people do it because it's good for them. And we came back home, you know, Nick came over and he was replacing some of his coffees in the day with matcha. And we just both came home and couldn't find it. And we're like, how is this possible? We are so far ahead of, you know, the rest of the world in Australia. Like the States obviously comes first, but Australia's really progressive in the health food market. There's other powders everywhere and no one's done matcha. And it's the least foreign. Like it's green tea. It's not like some weird algae something, you know? So that's how matcha started, was we literally tried to get the powder for ourselves, could only get it in bulk, and then had all this powder, like 10 kilos left over. I'm like, what are we going to do with this green powder? And it was meant to be a hobby. It was meant to be something that made me, you know, want to come home from work on time, and that I always knew that I had this creative side, because when I did law at uni, you know, I did arts as well. So I could you know, dancing and music. I'd always had that side of my personality, and very, very slowly and almost without realizing, law had started to dominate my life. So I became all career, all book smart side of my brain and no creativity. And this kind of sparked that alive again. And we were like, cool, you know, we have an excuse to be together more and spend more time together. And like, you know, it's something we could do as a couple. And
That's nice.
Yeah, it was just a really lovely hobby idea. And then it just absolutely took off. And, you know, we did everything on Google. Like, it sounds so stereotypical, but that is how most people who have just a random idea figure it out.
Oh, yeah.
Everything was DIY. We printed the labels at Officeworks, like queuing up behind uni students printing their exam notes. And, like, we were packing in our undies in a friend's commercial kitchen so that we wouldn't get clothing fibers in the bag. Literally, it was like Breaking Bad, but green. I say that all the time. Even the scales that we got off eBay were like little drug scales, and we're just like weighing all these little bags. And it sold out.
You should take photos.
I know, we've got photos, but I'm like, I don't think anyone's ever going to see those. They won't make the light of day. But it just all took off from there. And like within 6 months, it had gotten to the point, I wanted to leave very early, but I knew that, you know, we hadn't kind of given it enough time to pay my full wage or anything like that. So we waited and did both. And then about 6 months in, got a really big contract with Urban Outfitters in the US, who found us off Instagram. It was so random.
Oh my God.
And just shows the power of digital marketing, particularly back then.
Media.
Yeah, when it was really new, the algorithm was really different, less complicated, everything was chronological.
Yeah. The days.
The glory days. And that's how it all happened. And it slowly kind of, you know, I believe that if you're a good person, you work hard and you're open-minded and you are, you know, open to whatever comes next, and you're kind of exploring different opportunities, and often things find you that you never thought were going to happen, that you never thought were possible. Whereas if you have a really single-minded focus, you kind of exclude the possibility of anything else showing you the other things you could be doing with your brain. And
already shut it out.
Yeah, like it's totally fine. There are people who are amazing lawyers and who love it and who don't need to look for anything else. I've really tried to emphasize that I don't think happiness or freedom is leaving your job to start your own business, because there's a lot of anti-freedom in running your own business because you're chained to it all the time. So that's how my journey has panned out. For other people, it might be changing jobs to a different job, or changing positions, or changing industries and still keeping a job with a boss, or it might be not even in your job that you find your joy. It might be a new hobby that you start. You might learn a new instrument, or whatever it is. I just think the overarching message for me has been that if you're not trying to cultivate happiness somewhere in your life, then you're missing out. And I wasn't doing either. I wasn't joyful in my job, but I wasn't joyful outside either. I was just working, and that's it. So this really started to show me that what makes me alive is the creating. It's the people bit. It's the community. It's making people feel good. It's developing new ideas of like how to communicate the benefits of something. It's exploring wellness, and working with my partner was amazing. Yeah. But also the learning curve was so steep, whereas in a corporate environment, you're always learning, but it's very structured. It's like very stable and steady and predictable. And, you know, you've studied 7 years to get there, so you kind of know what's coming next. Yeah. But this was just like, what the actual fuck is happening? Like such a clusterfuck of a few years, just adjusting to everything. And yeah, I've realized over time that, you know, I've gotten closer and closer through all the different businesses, and now ultimately the podcast, all of it has been leading to this, which is I am and have always been such a joyful, excitable person who just loves the possibility of life. Yeah. And I am very, very lucky to have been born in a time where you're allowed to be joyful. We're not in a depression or a recession or a war, at least in this country. And I'm so excited that the world gave me an opportunity to move from an environment that didn't really nurture that. It nurtured other parts of me, but not that part of me that's meant to be here. Yeah. Now the podcast and everything about the journey and everything has led me towards helping other people see how to find joy, and and also that the journey isn't linear to finding joy, that there's lots and lots of shit in between, that there's complete breakdowns, you know, there's learning curves, there's relationship breakdowns, there's body breakdowns, health breakdowns, there's financial breakdowns, you know, everything is an adventure, and everything is a learning curve. But we live in a world where you're not expected to have just one journey at all. Totally. You're meant to have so many, and it's a shame not to enjoy that. Exactly.
You were actually, like, I studied eating psychology in like 2014, but I never really kind of did much with it. And your podcast has been a massive influence for me and my boyfriend actually to really pursue what I'm doing, because I kind of had it on the side and was kind of doing it, but every guest that you have on, and even you yourself, the message that you're giving to everyone is so amazing, and it's really inspiring, because it's like, why not try? Because what's going to happen? I'll always have my teaching degree. I can always go back to being a teacher. There's no harm in trying, you know? And I think, my boyfriend's in the same situation. He's an electrician, but his passion is snow. And we lived in Japan for 8 months last year and managed a ski lodge over there, and he was in his element, you know, and he really wants to get back into that. And I always send him your podcast. I'm like, listen to this one. This is really inspiring. Go to this minute. So yeah, you've been such a big inspiration. And even our yay, like I've always had so much yay. I do flying trapeze, and I always go for walks, and I've got lots of yay. But the other week I was talking to my boyfriend again, and I was like, what do you do that's just yay? And he's like, I have nothing right now. I'm like, well, that's where you need to begin, because I can see his mood kind of going down and all of that. So your podcasts seriously are incredible. Every guest you get on, and you
thank you so much.
They really are making a massive difference. I can't even thank you enough for putting those out there.
Oh my gosh, it seems like you're doing exactly the same thing. And the other thing I think is, when I first started the podcast, we had two like really big busy businesses. So I think now I know obviously that it had the potential to grow, but at the time I didn't know that. I had no experience in podcasting. I had no, you know, proof of concept that it was going to do anything other than be enjoyable for me and maybe one other person. And I think that's another thing that I really try and encourage people, is that now all our businesses look a certain way, but at the time of deciding to start, there was no guarantee that it would do anything. And I think the biggest thing in starting things is it doesn't matter.
Totally.
You don't have to be guaranteed that it'll be successful even. Like, I figure if you reach one person, even if that's yourself, to teach yourself something, then that whole process is worthy. Totally. And there are very few exceptions, obviously. If your business idea is an app, or if it's something that you need to dump $1 million into, then obviously it's not just like, you know what's going to happen, you're going to lose $1 million. It's a big deal. But with a lot of business ideas, or a lot of ideas, hobby ideas, anything ideas, you generally don't have to jump in with $1 million first.
Well, gotta have it first.
So I think, like, just get started on things without needing to know how they're going to go, because everything is a worthy activity if you learn something from it. And when you started, you know, you were just like probably worried that, will I have enough listeners or whatever, and now you're like, it doesn't matter if I still only had one listener each week. If that listener was someone who was changing their life because of the words they were hearing me say, that's so worth it. You would still do it, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I would do it if no one was listening.
Yeah.
You know, like
talk, so
yeah, and
it's perfect.
I think that's one of the big drivers for me is encouraging, and for myself, encouraging people that productivity and results and success don't have to be our driving factor to do everything. We have to be able to do activities in our life that are for the sake or for the joy or for the pure activity enjoyment of just completing something that doesn't necessarily teach you something 100%. Or doesn't, you know, like we don't do things like that anymore. Everything has to have an outcome that's like measured and guaranteed. And
totally. So through that process, right, I'm sure it wasn't all glory, stress-free and all of that, and you spoke about, you know, going through anxiety and all of that. So what, I guess, are your biggest strategies to help you with anxiety, and you know, what did you do to like navigate yourself through that?
So that's probably been, I think, the hardest part for me, because I am naturally at my best and at my most energetic. I'm such an excitable, bubbly, like person.
It's a great representation.
Yeah, everyone, you missed the video footage of that, but it was basically me in a nutshell. Anxiety has been a really, really hard thing for me to manage because, firstly, it's not as tangible as physical illness, so it's very hard to pace yourself because the warning signs are very subtle. Secondly, when you're an A-type, you're very proud and you're very like, nothing's going to stop me. I'm just feeling anxious. Like, just stop it.
Yeah.
You know, you kind of, it's very hard to understand. I didn't have it much when I was younger. In hindsight, looking back, I can pick out a few times that I had panic attacks and I didn't know that's what they were. I just thought they were nerves before a competition or something like that. But it really all started around the time when I lost all that weight. So I would say that putting my body under that much stress to be at like 45 kilograms kind of activated, well, I've obviously had, I obviously have it in my body to have quite severe anxiety, but that was probably the trigger. And from then on, I started having really severe panic attacks to the point of like quite socially crippling. Like I would be out somewhere and then I'd just get stuck in a bathroom and couldn't come out and had to get someone to pick me up because just the feeling of like, I can't even explain it. It's kind of like, at its worst, the panic attacks feel like I'm having a heart attack.
Wow.
Like my arms go numb, everything, all the symptoms of actual heart attack. Like the first time it happened, I called an ambulance. I thought it was that bad. And to physically feel symptoms bad enough to call an ambulance when no one wants to go that far, that extreme, it was that bad. To be told that was from mental anxiety, I just was so confused about it, and it's been a really long learning curve to understand anxiety isn't just stress. It's actually often not even linked to anything in particular. It's just your brain chemistry is out of whack. There are definitely things you can do to improve it or not flare it, but sometimes it appears to come on completely unrelated to anything. When it's a duller anxiety and not like a panic attack, the best way that I can describe it is imagine if someone called you and said, your closest loved one, something's happened. But they don't tell you what, and they say, I can't tell you anymore, and they hang up. That bit in between where you have this scrunched stomach, but you don't know about what, because you don't know what the result is. It's just sitting in that, but for days. And like not wanting to talk to people, everything is too much, everything's overwhelming. And for someone who's like, I thrive on operating at a really fast-paced, performing level when I can't perform, and not because of injury or illness. It's been so hard to learn the warning signs, to learn what triggers it or what flares it and what doesn't. But I think, again, it's like anything, a journey that hits you for a reason. It's a journey that is completely manageable. One of the things I say to people is I obviously still run 3 really big businesses, and I can do that with quite severe anxiety. So you don't become a non-functioning member of society. There are ways to manage it. For some people, it might be medication. For some people, like I, for example, see a therapist at least every fortnight, and I've been doing that for years.
That's awesome.
That is so immensely helpful. And there's a big pride bit to that as well, of I don't need a counsellor or psychologist. And then you get over it and you're like, I just want to feel good, and I want to learn about what my brain chemistry is doing and how I can help it with sleep is the biggest thing. Eating well and exercising is crucial, which I was pretty good at anyway, but sleep I was never really one to prioritize it. And then just realizing that slowing down doesn't mean physically slowing down.
Yeah.
It means mentally slowing down. So I always knew, I'd learnt the lesson from the physical adrenal fatigue that you have to learn to say no. You have to learn to say no to the things you don't want to do.
Yep.
But you also have to learn to say no to the things you do want to do when your
Yeah.
body is just giving you the signs.
Totally. Yeah.
It's taken me another 5 years or whatever, but I'm finally learning that in the context of anxiety, which is that there's obviously things that stress you out, and that's fine. I know how to manage those. But you can have too much of a good thing as well. So positive stimulation, and this is like a big revelation from this year, having too much joy and excitement is also bad for you.
So it's that balance, right?
Yeah, like you totally think that operating in a place of joy all the time would be good for you, but if it's too stimulating and you're on too much of the time, then even if it feels good at the time, it's usually fake energy, it's usually adrenaline, and that stimulation in your brain. Basically, the way I see it is the digital world has allowed our brains to go faster than they've had time to physically evolve to cope with, which is why there's so much mental illness. Yeah. We pack them full with information that is just too much for it to cope with, and then it like cracks the shits. And in my case, in some people's cases, they, I don't know, get physically sick, or they just have a breakdown or whatever, or some people have depression, or they just don't feel joyful, or they're tired all the time, whatever it is. For me, it's like I will crack and just have a fully anxious, can't string an email together couple of days. And it's because my brain's like, you've abused me. Even with good stuff, you've just been hammering at me with like thinking, always thinking. So my biggest lesson has been, firstly, get a therapist who can help you through it, especially if it's severe. Get medication, and don't have too much pride about that if it's going to endanger you, or, there's no point in feeling crap about things all the time, and you need to give your body what it needs to get to a stage where it can even think about putting good routines in place. So if you need to do that, do it. Meditation is enormously impactful. Like it's not woo-woo anymore. There are scientific studies about how it changes your brain and your synapses, and that just allows... Our brains are like 100 miles in front of our bodies. Meditation allows you, however many times you do it a day, to line them back up again. It just you don't have to stop thinking, but you stop adding new thoughts. So you can still think about the old thoughts, but you're just not adding new stuff all the time. So I kind of think of it as my way to let my brain catch up with my body, catch up with my brain. And I have to do that twice a day, almost 20 minutes twice a day.
It's awesome.
Because otherwise I just start to get, like, it's just, my anxiety will start to flare. I get that clenched feeling. I also have Sundays in my day where I almost don't look at my phone.
That's good.
I sleep in as long as I need. I literally just flake out to trashy Netflix, and I don't feel guilty about it anymore. Every time zone in the world is on a weekend on a Sunday.
That's so true.
Even if they're if they're behind us, they're on a Saturday. Still a weekend. One day a week when I don't talk to people allows me to do the whole rest of the week in an excited way.
Yourself. Yeah, that's so good. And especially what you said before about saying no, that's something that I've put into my life. Not that you have a massive schedule, I'm sure. I don't have as much going on as you.
Oh,
so I can imagine that you have so many things.
Everyone's jam-packed.
Totally. But saying no to certain things that I don't want to go to. I used to say yes to everything just because I felt bad if I didn't go. But now I'm like, I don't want to go to that. Yeah. And, there's things like, I had a friend's birthday the other week. I love that person, but I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take them out for lunch. Because I don't want to go out that night. I just wanted to be in bed or have a bath or, anything like that.
Absolutely. I really think letting go of guilt is a really big thing.
Totally.
And if you just change, I think all it takes for behavior change is a subtle change in your perspective. So if you learn, for me, it was realizing that every time I say yes to someone else, I'm saying no to myself. Yeah. I was like, that kind of stopped me in my tracks every time I was about to make the decision. I was like, I'm saying no to a whole night at home of unwinding and doing things that make me feel good. So do I really want to say no to myself? Like you have to think of it differently. Yeah. And the other thing that's been hard for me is now there are so many really exciting opportunities is that you have to say no even to the good things and trust that you're not going to become irrelevant or you're not going to lose your whole business because you said no once. Totally. There is such a thing as capacity, like max capacity, and you can't do even all the good things. Yeah.
Well, sometimes you've got to be selfish to give others the best of you as well.
Totally. Yeah. Totally.
And not so much selfish. Hello.
Ain't put it No, you're making
cameo. So for those who are listening, if you don't follow Sarah, which you should, Sarah did a podcast with Angfoot.
Anyone who's been on my social media at all will know who Angfoot is.
I feel like I know you. She's like, who is this girl? So I don't know you.
I tried to walk through there and be like, are they in this room or the other room? That was really quiet.
I love it. No, please.
You do your thing.
All right, so what I want to talk about really quickly is Instagram, and we touched on it a little bit before about how you obviously want to keep it real, want to keep it positive as well, but it's your brand. So you have to obviously share a certain amount of things, and you obviously want to keep it nice and positive, but do you feel there's any pressure to uphold that? Like, you do share your bloops and you do share the real side of you, but you're also really positive, and you share like when you're not feeling so great as well. But do you feel any pressure to make sure that you're always staying positive and inspiring, or and if you do feel like that and you're having those bad days, because I mean, I have days where I'm angry and sad, and I'm sure you do too. Do you just kind of like leave, stay away from Instagram on those days, or how do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, because it is sort of one of those times where you're like, if I am supporting, showing all sides of you, then I should get on my phone right now, because I should be showing the shit bits as well. I definitely have moments where I think about that. And I think it just comes down to, in that individual moment, is it going to make you feel worse to get on your phone, or is it not? And sometimes it doesn't. Like, sometimes you're having a bad day and I'm really anxious and I'm at home, but it's not related to social media or the demands of the digital world. Sometimes it's related to something else. So I'm like, I might just mention it so that, people remember that stuff's going on in the background.
Yeah.
I think my biggest thing is, definitely a little while ago, I would have felt more obliged to do certain things or not to do certain things. But one of the big realizations that started this whole bloop thing was that you can kind of create expectations for yourself, or you can create an environment where you don't feel that way. A lot more is in our control than we think. And it really does just depend on how much you decide to let in to your brain. How much of other people's opinions or concern are you going to let in, and how much you're going to just let bounce off you. And for me, I wanted to create, because I was running all the different accounts, I was on Instagram all the time, I had to make sure that it was a positive experience as much as possible.
Yeah.
And one of the things for me was removing expectations so that I didn't feel obliged all the time.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the thinking that led to bloops. I was like, if I do start to post all the shit bits, I don't worry when I only have the shit bits, because I'm having one of those days. And that's, face photos and body photos. Like, when I'm really bloated, I'll post that stuff.
Yeah.
Anxiety is a harder one because you don't really feel like being social.
Yeah.
And I guess there are days when I do go, I'm going to distance myself completely. I can't even deal with my phone. But I'll often mention it the next day, because I do feel like a certain level of, not obligation, but just responsibility, that if I'm putting myself out there as someone that shows all of it, I need to do that and not only show the positive bits.
Yeah.
I also don't want to show the bits where I'm bawling and like bleeding everywhere from my period, and like, I don't want to be an oversharer either.
There's a nice balance.
I think there's a nice balance, and I think I've really, really worked hard to remove any sense of obligation and to remove any part of my thinking that makes me feel really, really obliged to do a certain thing that doesn't. I think my approach now is I just do what feels good at the time, what feels like the overarching message is seize your yay, and whatever fits into that goes up, and whatever doesn't on the day doesn't.
Yeah.
I just think we do a lot of overthinking, and I've gone through that whole process of spending almost the whole of my 20s being an overthinker, an overgiver, an overdoer, and over everything. And part of
over it.
And part of my 30s has been just being more relaxed about everything.
Yeah.
The more you just chill out about trusting the universe and doing the right thing, I really do think that the more you do the right thing, the more you are exploring all of yourself, the more you're putting into yourself, the more you're trying to learn about what does suit you and what doesn't, the less hung up on everything else you get. 5 years ago, me wouldn't have recognized like laid back, not hung up me now. 5 years ago, everything bothered me. Everything was like, am I doing the right thing? Oh my God. Like, and you just get to the point where you're comfortable with who you are and what your values are and what your approach is. And I do feel responsibility, but I don't feel obligation.
Yeah. I think you do it well.
Oh, thank you.
Definitely.
Thank you. I think if you take a positive approach to it, it becomes more positive for you. 100%. And then that filters through to your followers and stuff. So they're not, expecting that you're going to feel, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but you also come from a place of genuinity. Like, you're really genuine, and everything you post is obviously from you, and you're not just, you know, faking it or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like, it's from your heart, and it's from exactly what you said, what you feel in the day, and whatever goes.
Yeah.
It's not as much overthinking anymore. It's just good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're coming to the end of our podcast, but I wanted to quickly talk about Seize the Yay. In particular, the Yay. So as we mentioned, the Seize the Yay is Sarah's podcast, and I guess the whole Yay kind of philosophy is that a lot of us lose like our inner child, our inner play, and how important that is. And I love that because I've always shared about that, and that's why I always do things, and I always have done things that really do make me happy. And a lot of us can lose that, especially as you're talking about when you were a lawyer, and a lot of it was the books and the study and all of that. So what do you have that is just like fun yay that you do?
Okay, so that's, I think, can't remember if I actually mentioned it before when we were talking about anxiety, but the finding the yay that's separate to productivity and stuff, that was the biggest strategy for my anxiety. It was having things that distract my brain from work, achievement, success, momentum, everything that's learning, getting better. You know, we're always trying to better ourselves and learn and give to the community and all that kind of stuff. Yay was me having to learn how to do things that didn't have an outcome and do things that make you forget what time it is. And that's when your brain is in such a happy place that's what really helps me combat my anxiety. And the scariest thing, like you mentioned about your partner, is that most of us don't know what they are. Yeah. It's not that we don't do them. We physically don't know what makes us happy and what makes us get into that flow state of forgetting what time it is. So I spent a really, really long time literally writing down when I noticed I was forgetting what time it is or whatever, and then looking back and seeing which things turned up the most. It's not as simple as going, what do you enjoy doing? You have to actually observe yourself for a little while before you remember. You know, if you're not in touch with that part of you, it's going to take a while to get back to that. But over time I kind of realized crime fiction is one of my favorite things, because you know, they're like deep enough plots that you can't think about anything else. So you kind of get lost in the story. And then I when I'm reading crime fiction books, I totally forget what time it is. I
really started to get into crime podcasts
too.
But I had to pull myself off this because at the time I was really loving the stories. And then I remember I was at school and I don't know, what are those called? Those big chopping things?
Guillotine?
Someone was using a guillotine.
Oh, I know what you could think about.
And all I could think about was like someone's arm getting chopped off. And I pictured it and I was like, that's not okay.
It's too much, babe.
Maybe I'm going to take myself back.
So, I actually fought it for a little while because I was like, what does it say about me that all I want to do in my spare time that makes me relax is listen to deep murder stories?
Yes,
but I've accepted it now. You can't help what makes you happy.
I mean, I'm not going to judge.
So crime TV, crime podcast, crime books. I think because it's the plot and because my law background, like I find the whole legal thing. So Law and Order, I love it. Anyway, war stories, love war history. What the actual fuck? It's so random, but that's how deep I went into exploring what I find interesting.
Yeah, love that.
Gardening. I'm so bad at it, know nothing about it, but just weeding, like there's so much satisfaction in like being tactile and you're outside and you can't hold your phone while you do it.
So true.
Puzzles.
Love puzzles. I don't do them, but I love them. Oh my God. I need to do them.
They have no purpose. You actually deconstruct the puzzle once you finish it.
So true.
So they're like the opposite of productive.
It's like a sandcastle.
Yeah, right? So they've been amazing to force me to like, so any kind of board game, because they force you to do something that has no purpose except fun. What else? I used to think, I still obviously, you know, I exercise and I play with that dog and all that stuff. I used to think of that as one of my yay activities. Now I get really like, we have a lot of studios that stock match us. So, you know, yoga isn't as much of a retreat now because it's very related to what we do. Yeah. So it's more just silly things like, sometimes I cook, but not so much. It's really just the crime fiction and the puzzles.
Awesome. I love that.
And just reading. And,
I love that they're different as well, because I've asked, not so much the exact question that I asked you, but I've asked a similar question. People are like, I like going to the beach, I like doing this. And that's amazing, don't get me wrong. Yeah. But yours are just so different.
They're so random. But the other thing with me is that if I love going to the beach, I love getting out in nature, but there's something about an activity that like doesn't physically allow you to think about your work. It's not just that you're away from your work, but if I go to the beach, I'll still often be thinking. Yeah, whereas a book forces me to direct my attention to one thing. That's not anything that I'm, you know, like it's
100%.
It's like focus meditation.
Yeah, my family started doing that on Christmas Day. We started doing board games. So every Christmas we'd have our lunch and then we'd all do a board game. So we'd all be around doing the board game, which would never end well, let me tell you. But no one would be on their phone, you know, and that's amazing.
It's
And it'd be like, oh, it's like 8 o'clock at night. Where did that time go? Yeah,
like Ange
really
and I
nice.
went and did a ceramics class recently, and it was like seize the clay.
Oh.
Because you physically got clay all over your hands. Like,
Yeah.
you can't, you know, it's a typical eat, pray, love, going to find those activities that make you forget where you are. There's so many of them. Just no one does them anymore because we're all so busy.
We don't think about them. Like, I would never think about doing that, but I'm like, I want to do that.
Yeah, go find a place.
Yeah.
Go like learn how to garden, or even like those painting classes. Like you don't have to be good at everything you do. You can just do it because it's silly and fun, and like you can paint a cactus, and you know.
Actually, there's a place down the road from my house in Cronulla that started doing workshops, and they have like that you make your own essential oils, and you make your own candles, and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm like, that'd be
There's
fun.
so many little like courses and workshops you can do, and or it can even be something as small as like, I don't know, home DIY projects at home of fixing things, or like we went through a phase of like repainting all our door frames, and that I found really meditative because you can't concentrate on anything else.
I last year when we lived in Japan, we had to renovate the lodge that we're working on, and I had to paint all of the walls and the doors. I hated it. And the first like day, I was like, this is so therapeutic, and it was like a whole wall, and I was using like a paintbrush. And I was like, this is so therapeutic, and then an hour later, I'm like, I hate this. I never want to do this ever again. But I want to do like a feature wall, but like do like a sick painting. Not that I can paint, but that's what I want to do.
But see, it doesn't matter if you can or not, right? You'll figure it out.
I mean, the wall will be ruined. But who cares? It's fun.
Well, that's the other thing. I'm like, you can paint over it. It's not a big deal.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Yeah, or like you can, I don't know, there's just so many things that you can do, and I don't think people make time in their calendars to do them.
It's true. I love it. All right, I want to end with 2 questions. Okay. First one. Who has been the most influential person to your life or career, or both?
My mum. Absolutely. She's
beautiful.
amazing. She's taught me everything I know about the universe and people and love and patience, and she's just incredible, and has been the perfect amount of supportive and guiding, but also, you know, go and kind of do whatever. There's never been pressure to do anything, but there's always been support to do everything, and
that's beautiful.
She's a very, very wonderful person.
Amazing. And last question. What's one piece of advice that you would give your 10-year-old self?
Oh, goodness. Oh, I'd just pick her up in my arms and cuddle her.
That's beautiful.
I think for me, I would just say, God, I don't
do everything exactly the same.
Yeah, I think it would just be to keep trusting the universe, to keep always believing that good things happen when you hang out with good people and do good work and do nice things and surround yourself with good people. You know, there's goodness out there. Never get bogged down by the shit bits. They're there because they have to be, but they're not the totality of humanity. You know, there's lots of shit stuff out there, but there's lots of amazing stuff out there, and I really think you kind of choose which you focus on. And yeah, just be you, trust that you're enough. I've always really felt like I'm enough. And
that's beautiful.
I know now, as the older I get, I know now that that's not common. I don't know why. I think it's, you know, a lot of people have good families and still don't feel that. So I don't know if it's only my family, or I don't know if it's having grown up with this intense sense of gratitude. I don't know what it is, but I've always felt that way, and I know how lucky I am to feel that way. So to remind myself to hold on to that, because it can get crushed in such a small experience or a small sentence from someone, and then to just keep helping others get there, doing whatever you can to help others feel like they're enough, or they're worthy, or that life is exciting for them, and that you'll end up where you're meant to be.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much. I can't believe it's over. You don't understand how nervous I was.
Oh my God,
you know when
really?
you get like self-doubt and you're like, oh my God, I can't even do this. I don't know how to, I'm not even an interviewer.
Oh,
but
no, you did an amazing
so
job. This was
glad that it's
wonderful.
over. Not glad that it's over, but I'm like, I did it.
I can't believe you were nervous, you sweetheart.
But yeah, I thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It was an honor. When you emailed me, I was like, for sure.
I know. I literally emailed Sarah. I was like, what do I have to do to get you on my podcast? She's like, just ask.
Yeah, I know. I was like, I'm on.
Yeah, I'm there.
Well, that's the other thing. I think the other thing I would say to my young self is it's a no unless you ask. So
And
just ask
that is,
for
I'm
stuff.
living by that lately.
Yeah.
Literally, I only messaged you because of that in my head. I was like, she's only going to be like, I'm really sorry, but no.
Yeah.
Or she'll say yes.
Yeah,
And I said yes,
totally.
and now I'm in Melbourne, and we just recorded the podcast.
Right?
It's amazing.
People say yes way more than you think they do.
They really do.
And you're like giving yourself an answer by not asking, so just ask.
All right. Well, thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, I would be so grateful if you were able to leave me a review. And please follow me on Facebook and on Instagram at BearXBrave. If you have any questions or you want to contact me at all, please email me at lyh_podcast@outlook.com. I'll talk to you in my next podcast.